I have a question for you that I'd like you to think about just for a few minutes. Is your grief and loss model that you're working with, that you have been working with, adequate? There's been so many losses this last year. So many people that are dealing with transition, dealing with job loss, financial loss, loss of health. There have been family members who have passed away. There's been a great disturbance in the whole church community. Losses of all kinds, from the way things used to be to whatever the way things might become in the future. I want to suggest that your loss model, my loss model, if it looks like this, might be inadequate. But let's talk about this one just for a minute, because I think there's a lot of value in thinking about loss and thinking about grief with some of these terms and some of these definers in mind. When your loss happens, there's often shock and denial. And then there's this valley that people can often go into when they've had a loss or they're dealing with grief. There's often anger, bargaining. Depression is not an unusual feeling, mood that people end up finding themselves in. But good grief and good loss emotionally eventually leads to that place of acceptance. Over time, they get to this place of acceptance. Now, having gone through a lot of different types of losses myself this last year, including one that would be considered a capital T trauma, having lost my wife to cancer in May, I've definitely been doing a lot of thinking and also processing as it relates to my loss. But what I'm learning is that regardless of the degree and the size and the shape of the loss that you and I have to grieve, we need a model that will be adequate to help us deal with the complexity that grief often is. And I want to show you a model that I stumbled across in my reading that I've been working with, and I'd like you to consider it and think about the losses that you've dealt with yourself. I want to do this in two parts. The next video that you'll see in another week from today will deal more with dealing with communities that are dealing with loss, congregations that are going through loss and they're grieving change and they're grieving in their transition. Today I want to focus on you as an individual, you as a leader, you as a parent, as a father, a mother, a friend, somebody that has dealt with loss over your life on multiple different levels and in different ways. And this is called the puzzle piece model of grief and of dealing with loss that I came across in the book called Resilient Grieving. And this is by no means a complete model. As you can see, there are many puzzle pieces that you can add to this whole journey we call grief and dealing with the losses of life. These are just a few that I have found extremely helpful, and as I've been interacting with people, with leaders, with families, with those who have dealt with all kinds of losses, these are some that I have found extremely helpful because everybody's experience of grief and of loss is going to be different. There are no two people that will experience the same journey after a loss, regardless of how large that loss is or how small that loss is. But here are just a few of the puzzle pieces that I think are critical in your grief model that we need to include and have room for. We need empathetic listening. We need people in our lives when we have a loss who will listen to our story and who won't give advice and tell us it's going to be okay, but they're just there with us empathetically, coming over to where we are and feeling what we feel and identifying with our suffering and our pain and so on. Another puzzle piece that is so important, I believe, is exercise, whether it's a good walk or whether it's some type of more energetic exercise, cycling, running, going to the gym. This is a huge piece that I personally have found very important on my grief journey. I've called it grief cycling. And it's been something that has created a lot of healing in my body and in my mind and in my heart. So exercise is an important piece in the grieving process. Normalizing suffering. it's another puzzle piece that I think is valuable and very important, because if the person is stuck on this thought that life should be good all of the time, their grieving will get stuck. They're dealing with the losses of their life. They'll get stuck. We need to normalize suffering and have that as a part of our grieving model, our grief and loss model. Journaling is personally something I find incredibly important, because it allows you to process a lot of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. It's a way to get it out there and see it and reflect on it. Very important in dealing with loss and grief. A growth mindset is at the core of what it takes for us to actually grow through suffering and loss and dealing with the difficulties we've been through. It's the opposite of a fixed mindset that believes that I have everything I need to get through what I'm going through. When you're going through loss and grief, you don't often have what you need. You need to learn. You need to experience new people and understand new ideas so that you can actually get through that. And another one that I'll say more about at some point in the future, but there's this idea of some type of a grief cleanse where you allow yourself to go down deeper depending on the severity of that loss. It's an experience that I did just a week ago, a 7-day grief cleanse, where every day I just spent some time going down deep into my grief and what I was experiencing, journaling that and reflecting on that, and found it a very healing process. And I want to invite you to put in the comments, whether it's on the blog or on the YouTube video, below the YouTube video. I'd love for you to put down some of the puzzle pieces that you have experienced that you would recommend those people who are needing to travel through their grief, deal with their loss in a healthy way. And the other thing I would love you to consider is to reflect on that question. Is your grief and loss model adequate? And if not, what are some of your thoughts as you think about expanding the model? Why is that helpful? Why would that be valuable? Why might it be worth your while to consider your model and expand upon it and develop it, not only for the people you work with, but more importantly, especially in this video, for your own life, so that you yourself will not get stuck because you never dealt with something that's happened to you, whether it's last month, last year, 10 years ago. And I want to encourage you to travel forward, to travel down into your grief, into your losses, so that you can become truly healthy and whole and healed, which is God's desire for all of us. Thanks for watching, and go down and leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you.